So Trump's own niece, Mary Trump, has a bone to pick with him. This time, she's taken shots at him over his inability to handle crises. He will not help you, Trump family member says. President-elect is terrible in a crisis. If you're relying on Trump to help you in the wake of disasters like the fires that are raging in LA, don't hold your breath, says a member of Trump's own family Saturday. Mary Trump is a trained psychologist who has criticized her family in the past. She weighed in on Trump's response to the fires over the weekend, calling out her uncle's decision to instantly attack California Governor Gavin Newsom. Okay, so first of all, is he totally wrong to attack Gavin Newsom? Not necessarily. I mean, people have pointed out problems with California for a while now. The California Democratic Party. One major critic of the California Democratic Party is Anna Kasparian, and I talked about that. She's got major beef with them, and she's called Gavin Newsom the worst governor in the country by a lot. I don't totally agree with that, but, Gavin Newsom sure is not perfect. So Trump's not totally wrong to criticize that. He is wrong, however, to deny climate change, and it does show his inability to handle a crisis, to adapt to new information. He has maintained in the past that climate change is a Chinese hoax. He's given different opinions on it throughout the years, some of which are more acknowledging of the severity of climate change. But regardless, he appoints climate deniers to his cabinet, oil executives, people who will allow the EPA to deregulate, people who will allow polluters to pollute like there's no tomorrow. And it's just insane. It's not the type of person you want in charge of environmental disasters. That's for darn sure. Unfortunately for us, one of the people who has been most vocal and least useful during this ongoing tragedy, Donald Trump, is terrible in a crisis. By that, I don't mean he doesn't handle crises well, although this is undoubtedly true. I mean he exploits tragedies for his own ends, making things worse for the rest of us in the process, she wrote. Yeah, that's definitely true. That is definitely true. He exploited a lot of crises. Possibly COVID-19 was the most recent one. But yeah, it's not a good look. And it's not good for the United States. He uses crises to sow division in the country. Think about stuff that's going on at the border. He will look at that. You give him an inch, he'll take it a mile. So if he smells blood in the water with regard to the border, he will go absolutely ham. Oh, someone crossed the border illegally and did something bad. I'm going to point this out. I'm going to call it out. And I'm going to say that it's all the fault of the Democrats and their support for open borders that freaking caused this person to get killed or raped or something like that. It's peak demagoguery. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about it so much that way. It's mostly, I think of just the idea that he's ignorant and the people he surrounds himself with are incompetent for the most part. And that makes him terrible in a crisis. But he actually behaves terribly in a crisis too, in that he uses it for demagoguery. And he's fairly competent at demagoguery. You got to give him that. He's not competent when it comes to policy, but he is competent when it comes to pitting groups of people against each other and trying to gain something out of it, taking advantage of the situation in one of the most slimy ways possible. So yeah, that's a good point from Mary Trump. She then added, while a significant portion of our most populous state is literally on fire, conspiracists and purveyors of disinformation on the far right, and let's be honest, they're always on the right, are following Donald's lead by politicizing the disaster. Yes, I have seen right-wingers galore saying that this was arsonists, this was Democrats, actual Democrats, setting fire to this place so that they could blame it on climate change. What is wrong with you to say such a thing? To think that people, your own fellow Americans, would set deadly fires just so they could blame it on climate change, killing people in order to promote a political agenda? That's not what people on the left do. That's not what people in the Democratic Party do. Now, I mean, look, I'm not saying Democrats never level outlandish accusations against Republicans. So in that sense, I sort of disagree with Mary Trump in that I also think that people on the left tend to peddle nonsense as well, and tend to peddle disinformation. But the right does it so much more. And Trump, there's no comparison between Trump and anyone in the Democratic Party in terms of how much they lie, how much they use demagoguery, and how much they basically try to pit Americans against each other and take advantage of crises like this. We've seen the real world consequences of what happens when Donald is in charge during a crisis. He's withheld disaster aid from states whose governors didn't pay him sufficient obeisance. He's diverted resources away from first responders. He's repeatedly failed communities in crisis, and he's often made recommendations based on pseudoscience that have made everything worse, she wrote Saturday. What we can expect, because we've seen time and time again, if you need help in a crisis, but you do not kiss Donald's ass sufficiently, he will not help you. He will use the crisis to perpetuate misinformation and conspiracy theories, which will lead to a greater loss of life. He will blame the victims. He will divide us against each other. That is the playbook. Yeah, I didn't always think of it that way. I mostly just thought of how the guy is incompetent at crisis management, that he doesn't know much about science, and that's a real problem when we deal with natural disasters, climate change problems, a pandemic. We probably won't deal with another pandemic in these next 4 years. Those things are extraordinarily rare, but if we do, there's still reason to be concerned, just as we were concerned in the start of 2020, where it's like, oh shoot, we have an anti-science leader and there's a pandemic that is unprecedented, ravaging the country. But yeah, there's also the demagoguery aspect. So credit to Mary Trump for pointing this out. He's going to take advantage of the crises. He's going to say, oh, I'm just trying to do what's right, and this is all the Democrats' fault. This is all the victims' fault, whatever. Total nonsense. Be prepared for it. Be prepared for the worst. I'm not saying that the absolute worst is going to happen. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. But being prepared for the worst never really hurts. It never really does. And then when the worst doesn't happen, you can be pleasantly surprised. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video. Please like, comment, or subscribe to the channel for more.